inside out process, anchors of discipline, abhyas, vairagya. What are the tools? What are the outside in? Which is the, we will use Ashtang Yoga, which is the most commonly known. Asht means 8, Ang, some call it limbs, some call it parts. So we'll use the limbs right now. So Ashtang, 8 elements to it. So when we look at 8 elements, there are 2 kinds of these. There are what are known as Bahirang or outside ang, outside limbs, and Antarang. So what are they Bahir and Antar to? Bahir means they are external to the mind. So remember, Raj Yoga is about Chitta Vritti, mind stuff. So what are the tools and techniques which are outside the mind to get the mind first into some state where we can use the Antarang? So really work with the mind, because initially the mind doesn't work with you. So there is a certain level that we have to work with to get into a place, our rest of the system in place, to make sure we can work with the mind. Right? To a lot extent, Hatha Yoga is about that. If you remember, Hatha Yoga was about how do we prepare the body and energy system to work with the mind. So there are 5 Bahirams. We call them Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, and Pratyahar. We will take each one of these. In fact, we'll take all the 8 one by one. But these are just, I think, the overall big picture. So Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Pratyahar. And the Antarangs, once this happens, are Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi. Okay. Today we will look at Yam, Niyam in the remaining time. And then, as we said, part 2, we will cover the other 5. Okay. So that's the broad structure. With this, we will get into Yam as the first. So what is Yam, or what are Yams? Some may say it in English. So Yam, these are the rules of engagement with what is external to us. Right? So how do we deal with the external world? So that's how Patanjali starts. The first thing, how do we deal with this external world? Right? To Anand's point, how do we start this journey in this world that we are in? That's the first thing that he gives. There are 5 of these principles that we will talk about. And the important thing is each one of these principles has to be implemented at 3 levels. Right? And we'll come to those 5 yams and we'll talk of all of them at the 3 levels. The 3 levels are the mind, the man, the speech, vachan, what do we say, and the karam, the action. Right? So what are these? This is the manomay, pranamay, and annamay kosha. Right? So we have to implement these in the field, or work at this in the field at the 3 levels. That's very important, that it is true only if at all 3 levels we have reached a certain level of awareness in this. We'll start with awareness in each. So now I'll take one by one. Okay. So I would see if people, we will do it like a rapid fire. So we'll start with one. People can unmute themselves. So for example, the first one, Yam, is ahimsa, right? So this is a table, what not to do. So I'm starting with saying what not to do. So when do we know we are doing hinsa? So if people can just quickly say, okay, in action, what would hinsa look like?
Not harm anybody.
Yeah,
Not
so not
kill
harm
anybody.
anyone. Correct.
Rage.
And in speech, what would that look like?
Abusive.
Yes, abuse, express anger, say bad words. Excellent. And in mind?
Judgments.
Judgments. Yes, in mind, what else?
Criticism.
Ill about someone.
Jealousy, criticism.
Yeah, ill about someone, criticism. Criticism, yeah, expressed will be in vachan, in mind it will be judgment. Correct. Exactly. So that's ahimsa. So practicing ahimsa is not doing these things. This is a harder one, usually because it's framed as negative. So what do we do to practice? This is what we don't do. What do we do? So ahimsa actually has been dealt quite a bit with. So a big part of Jainism as a religion is actually ahimsa. Right? It's a very powerful thing. Gandhiji entire based a lot on ahimsa itself, for example. So there is that. So Jainism actually prescribes 3 things to cultivate. They call it friendliness, maitri, forgiveness, shama, and fearlessness, abhay. So in fact, Gandhiji also says that practicing ahimsa is the most courageous thing. It requires the most courage. You have to be really fearless to practice this. So maitri, shama, abhay, or friendliness, forgiveness, and fearlessness. So that's ahimsa. Okay. And this we are doing with the external world, right? Remember, yams are all about how do we deal with the external world. So ahimsa first. Second is satya, or truthfulness, loosely. So what would be it in action?
Not tell, okay.
That would be in speech. Good.
Not tell lies, yeah.
Yeah.
Action is also not to do something which is wrong, in the sense not damage property, not damage, hit somebody. I'm not able to articulate well, but
Yeah, that would be more like ahimsa. Anything else on anybody?
I
So
would say hypocrisy.
Yes,
Being
hypocrisy.
hypocrite.
Saying something and doing something else, right? Not meeting your commitments.
yeah.
Does robbery come under this?
No, robbery is the next one. We'll come there. Yes. So, Karam is exactly not meeting your hypocrisy, doing something, saying something.
Lack
Speech
of
is
integrity then, yeah.
lie. In mind, what would be asatya or not satya?
Again, the thought and the what you say and what you think. No, there's a
Mismatch.
congruence in that. So
Congruent.
No, but we also tend to fool ourselves, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say illusion.
Illusion.
Illusion. Yes. Beautiful. Actually, I had an illusion.
Cunningness.
Lying to yourself, being truthful to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Being cunning, yeah.
Yeah. And planning also, cunning, deceitful. Exactly. That's there. Beautiful. I think we'll add them. And hence, what to cultivate, right? On the other side, what to cultivate. Of course, truthfulness is there, but congruence.
Congruence is very important.
Very important to cultivate, to be aware of acceptance. And to build that acceptance, a lot of courage is required. Courage to be truthful to yourself, courage to face the consequences of what's happening outside. Yeah.
I
Okay.
like the word acceptance, because somewhere even when you're when there's another person involved, engaging with an outside world, it's like even if you are thinking, "Arey, ye sach bata raha hai ya jhoot bata raha hai," so that is also non-acceptance in some way. It's
That's the judgment. Yeah, that's the hinsa. That's the hinsa. Correct. So the third one is Asteya, which means non-stealing, essentially. Like what I think Anirudh was asking. So in action, what would it be? Not steal something. Simple, right? So in speech, how would it be?
Plagiarism.
Plagiarism. Yeah, exactly. Plagiarism, at least, is an example. Right? Claim something to be yours which belongs to somebody else. And in mind?
Again, that deceit and that cunningness to, okay, how do I steal something? That the whole thought.
There is a planning. Every planning to do an action is part of it. Is there anything else? Somebody?
I mean, how I look at it is even being late for a meeting is stealing someone else's time,
Yeah.
I don't know if that fits in here, but
Sure. It also fits in Satya because you promise to be at a time and not be there. Yeah. But I'm talking mind level. Those are in action.
How about jealousy, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're constantly maybe thinking about someone else and trying to be, or
envy.
Envy. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Both envy and jealousy. So desire something of someone. So you're mentally stealing it.
Okay.
Yes.
And also I was thinking about being superior to somebody, that feeling of superiority. I don't know if it comes here.
Sure.
So coveting something that might be.
Yes, coveting will be.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yes. So what do we cultivate to practice this is generosity, sharing, and compassion. That's what we can cultivate. So oftentimes there is a sutra in Patanjali says Viprit Bhav. So whatever, do just the opposite. So Asteya of opposite of Asteya is generosity. Right. So that will help you cultivate Asteya. Okay. That's a common one of the sutras.
So therefore, would miserliness also come in as one of them, what not to do somewhere?
Yeah. Yes. It's something you're keeping away. Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. The fourth one is Brahmcharya. So Brahmcharya is translated in multiple ways. Even different commentators in this context have used it differently. Some have focused it only on sexual abstinence, and some have said in general not to indulge in sensual pleasure. So all five, which is taste, sight, listening, smell, and touch. So it's Brahmacharya in what we eat, how attached we are, or to food, to what we see, to what we listen, like the music, the TV, all that is going on, the smell and the touch.
This is all of our tamas.
I'm suddenly wondering, how do we experience joy?
Yes, good point. We'll come to that. And so one example of even for speech would be to indulging in that by saying, talking about it, of how delicious. I'm just taking food as an example, but it could be applied for all.
Joy, the delight of eating something very mundane, you know. So it's, yeah.
Yes. And so one of the ways of actually practicing Brahmacharya is cultivating joy. Cultivating joy with self, which is the Atmanev, Atmanatushta. So when you experience that joy in just being, slowly, with that practice, with that abhyas, you will start seeing less of the needs of these automatically. This will go down from direct sensual or overindulgence in it.
Currently, what we do is we try to do the doing in the being. The other way would be the joy. If you can actually be in the being without the doing.
I think what I'm picking up is there's this thing, a subtle difference between indulgence, finding joy in indulgence and simple joy. I think that is...
So one of the classic examples in this is, to explain this was that if we are, say a person is taking a walk, right? Going along, a yogi is walking. So, or somebody is walking and he's doing a walk from Bombay to Surat, right? He's doing a walk. So while on his way, he's doing that person walking, and somebody comes and says, okay, Guruji or whatever, for you, I have made this gulab jamun. Correct? So now the gulab jamun comes, Guruji sees, he eats it, he enjoys the gulab jamun and continues his journey.
This walking, yeah.
That is Brahmacharya. Now, if he were to stop there saying, okay, I need more gulab jamun, that wouldn't be, or if he continues his journey and keeps thinking about the gulab jamun, right? That wouldn't also be Brahmacharya. So in fact, in I think Buddhist stories, there is one such story where there were two monks, and this is known as a true story. There were two monks who went to a river bank. Yeah, and there was a lady who wanted to cross. So one monk said, I will, okay, he picked her up, helped her cross the bank, came back. The other monk was in shock. He said, oh, we are, and then they continued their walk for some time. Then after half an hour, he asked the other monk, we are not supposed to touch women. How did you pick her up and let her cross the road or cross the river? And the other monk said, I only had her on my shoulder for these few minutes that I crossed, but you have been carrying her for way longer. Right? And there are multiple such examples. So it's not about denying also ourselves. Senses are very much part of it, part of our existence, right? They're very important. So to our existence. So it's not denying us that, but it's not indulging in them. That's the difference.
I think this is about being detached, just being engaged for that little bit and then detaching and moving ahead.
Yes.
I think this is
That's
very
Vairagya, right?
Vairagya.
Yes.
Yeah,
In some ways, yes.
Yeah.
But yes, in this it becomes more. So yeah, just another on the mind stuff. It's mostly fixated on the meal to be had. So I think it's about that. It's not about denying, because denying, or even if that yogi who is walking said, oh no, I don't want gulab jamun because it's whatever, it will indulge me. that is also not Brahmacharya, because that's come. So repulsion is also not Brahmacharya. So it's both. I think that finding that thing that it is part of the there at that moment and then it's gone. I think that's the important thing. You don't create that karma. So
Krishna
what do
said
we
in
cultivate?
Gita, right?
Sorry, Rama.
Sorry, like Krishna said in Gita, right? Do your thing, but don't expect anything back in return.
Yes, to some extent. Yeah. So this is, yeah, I think this is not exactly about the return. This is more saying, don't continue with that. That moment is gone. Just finish, right? And we'll come to that as well. So what to cultivate? The first is joy from self. I think that's the most key. We are really looking for joy when we look for sensual pleasure, right? So if we are finding joy in other ways from our own self, then we don't need, I think, willpower and restraint. The more we engage, the more it gives power to that sensual pleasure itself. Right? It only makes, it's a vicious cycle. It's our choice whether we make it virtuous. So reversing it through willpower. Even every time you will say no to something, your strength will go up, and the strength of the opposing thing, any habit we want to change, will come down. Okay, so that's fourth. Last one, Aparigrah. This is translated largely as not hoarding possessions or expecting gifts. So it's about non-possessiveness in a lot of ways. So how would it be in speech? Talk about what to buy next, like all this planning. When will the next discount sale come? What is the next jewelry item or home item or electronic item I'm going to get? So all that discussion, this analysis, what's the best specs, all that is
withholding information.
Sorry?
I mean, in speech terms, withholding information, not, I mean, it sort of sounds similar to Asteya to some extent, but is that relevant here?
No, I think withholding information might even be, depends on the context, will be Satya also. Yeah, holding information though could be, to your point. So if somebody is just holding information for power, for example. So this is a lot about power. So where I derive my power from, right? So it is, yes, so right, you're right in that sense. Information is linked with power now. Correct. It's what's the intention of holding the information, yeah. So if you see, this is going to the mind. So there is an intention element. And so it's basically about this feeling of possessiveness or power that comes from it. And it could be for things, for fame, for respect, for likes, for people, information as well. So it's a lot around greed and power. So that's the core around the mental stuff of Aparigrah. So what to cultivate? Gratitude. Gratitude for what we have, contentment and simplicity. So this is the reason why monks would go to that extreme on saying, okay, we lead a very simple life.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
So in our today's life, right, work life, professional life, being ambitious, does it go against or does it fall on that Aparigrah, what not to do?
Yes,
when I say being ambitious, yes, then you are in that rat race.
Yes. So if it's primarily driven by, again, it's what's the intention. So if it's about power, success, or money, etc., material, it will be around this. Somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it is unfortunately measured, right? I mean, when I say ambition, the growth is measured by the power and the money and the rank and everything.
Correct. Yeah.
And also one of the things that I was thinking, Sandeep, the contentment also comes from minimalism.
Yes.
Yeah.
That simplicity. Yeah. Minimalism, simplicity.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Exactly. So that's what to cultivate. So quickly to summarize, the 5 yums are rules of engagement. This is for how we deal with the external world. They have to be implemented or thought of at 3 levels: the mano, prana, and annamaya level: action, speech, and mind. And just want to highlight this here that it is a complete system in itself in a lot of ways. So a lot of it, so if you look at Jainism, actually the right conduct are almost these 5. Buddhism also, the elements of right conduct are very similar. And Patanjali, Buddha, they were at similar times. So there is an influence across these systems. Gandhiji also talked a lot. So the values of the Gandhi ashram, Sabarmati ashram are very much on these lines, if you really see. So these are like the core, many people who have arrived at these values. And this is what they are, 5. I'm not translating them because there is power, I think, in the words. And as we are doing the Foundations of Yoga course and looking at becoming yoga professionals, also it's important we know these words as they are and make our own meanings also, make our own translations in some. Yeah, we are short on time, so niyams are little simpler. They are 5, so we'll go through them and then quickly we might go 5 minutes over. I think if you're I hope all are okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I can't see everyone on my screen, so if somebody is not, just unmute and say. We'll try and then move it to next time. Okay, so niyams. So niyam, what are niyams? Niyams are guidelines how we work with ourselves. So just like yams are about external, niyams are about what do we do internally. Some of it has come in what we cultivate, but there are 5 niyams that Patanjali has talked about. So what do we do inside? What you can say mindsets that we create for ourselves. Yeah. So niyam, and people who know Hindi probably see niyam as rules. And I would say these are not rules, these are guidelines. So we cultivate them, just like everything else we cultivate, we build, because vairagya, again with them. Abhyas vairagya applies here also. Okay. So the 5 niyam, what are they? First is Soch, right? Soch, the word we have seen is Shauchalay. Unfortunately, it's used that way, but Soch really means cleanliness.
Cleanliness.
Purity. So we've named Shauchalay toilets as clean places. This is place where we get clean because the body gets clean here. We release our toxins there, right? So it's about cleanliness, purity, and this happens in our body, starts with our body, our surroundings, our thoughts as well. So it's, and our pranas also, right? So it is happening at, again, the 3 levels. So Soch, being aware of that and building that purity, that cleanliness to start with, right? So it's okay. I think that's why a daily bath, for example, was always recommended, always part of our daily routine in India. And it's not necessarily so in all cultures. So it starts probably for somebody with the body, and that's fair. And but it's about the surroundings, about the thoughts as well. Okay. Santosh. So Santosh is satisfaction, contentment. Sorry.
No, I was just, sorry, I didn't realize I was not on.
Okay. So satisfaction, contentment, which we saw in one of the yams also. So there is a relation between the two, of course. So second is santosh, living with contentment, with satisfaction. The third is tapa. So what is tapa? Tapa is seen as being single pointed, austerity, and there are extremes, but essentially one way to describe it is being single pointed towards your goal and not getting affected by what comes on the way, right? So there will be success, failure, just keep moving towards your goal. That's the kind of mindset that is required. That is what this is about. So there is also sacrifice element in it. So sometimes there will be things which we will have to give up, which we may not want to on this path, etc. So this is just preparing us for that. So one extreme side of tapa is also seen as austerities, in being very extreme, fasting extreme, body extreme. So that's not the essence of at least this tapa. It's being saying whatever it takes, right? So it might take an extreme measure, but not doing the extreme for the sake of extreme, right? It's just saying whatever it takes, I'll be doing. I'll figure out a way. If on this journey something comes up which I don't like, I'll figure out a way to yogify that also, right? To include that. and still do what I am really looking for. So that's what tapa is about. The fourth is swadhyay. So swadhyay is two words, swa adhyay. So it's again self-study. It's about studying yourself. So some also see it as about reading scriptures, but I think that's not what Patanjali meant. It was about self-study. It's knowing yourself, being aware of yourself, what's going on, right? And I think that's happening in some ways through the Nididhyasanam. A lot of introspection, reflection is included. So that's something we have to constantly cultivate in ourselves. And I think this group is already doing that. From what I've seen of the Nididhyasanam sheets, very, very aware, far aware. I think this quality is very well built in already. The last one is Ishwar Pranidhan. So this essentially Pranidhan means like surrender to Ishwar. And then the question comes, what or who is Ishwar? The way Patanjali and the Sankhya philosophy sees Ishwar. In fact, Sankhya philosophy doesn't even define what is Ishwar. And it just talks of a principle called Purusha, from which is consciousness. And Ishwar is known as Purusha Vishesh. So like special consciousness. It's consciousness at its universal level. What it has been translated into for people to make it again more accessible is sometimes there are images, there are idols, etc. because we need that support initially to work with it. And we'll deal with this a lot more in Bhakti Yoga as well. But in the context of Patanjali Yoga Sutras, that's what Ishwar is. So it's important to know Ishwar in Patanjali system is not an idol. It's not one particular God, or it's not even God. So the translation is very hard to do. It's the concept of a Vishesh Purusha, special Purusha. Purusha is consciousness that resides within us. So it's some ways also within us, or an element of this Ishwar is definitely within us. That's how this is seen. And you can translate it as surrender to that divine self, to that divine consciousness that is there, and trusting that consciousness. So, and it sort of is hence to service to something bigger, right? So because it's about the Purusha within us, there is a bigger version of it outside. So it's service or surrender to that. Okay. So these are the 5 niyams, which are what are the mindset we build.